Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, Deavan and Jihoon. Let's watch.
Your tears mean nothing to me. Drusilla is everything to me.
I know.
I have protected her and her mom, and you made a promise. You promised you would take after him. You promised, like 5 minutes beforehand.
So I can really see both sides. I don't think the mom is entirely fair to just say your tears mean nothing to me. But I understand. I mean, from the grandma's perspective, she is sending off her daughter and her grandchildren to a foreign country, and they are going to depend on Jihoon a lot because this is Jihoon's country. He knows his way around, and Deavan is not. And so the grandma, is going to lose all, her daughter and the two grandkids, and hope that they can at least be safe. And there's been a lot of evidence that Jihoon is not going to be able to provide and isn't going to help them to be safe, not only with the running out into the road, but also with getting an apartment that is safe and other issues that they've faced. So I get where the grandma is coming from. But I get where Jihoon is coming from. I wish I could have seen what happened, because on one hand, I think it's possible that Jihoon completely dropped the ball. I don't think he did it on purpose, if he did. And just like she started running off and he just turned around, or he was like, oh, I guess she's running out in the road. I mean, the way that they're coming across, it's like he just let her run out into traffic and didn't care at all. So that's the way they're characterizing it. And then as soon as they said, catch her, he stopped and said, hey, stop yelling at me, and didn't care about Drusilla's life. That's the way they're characterizing it. On the other hand, I could see a situation where he innocently let go of her arm because they were far away from the road, and Drusilla, for whatever weird reason, just did a 100-yard dash toward the road, and he ran out, because we did see him running. We saw him sprinting, and by the way, in flip-flops, which is not easy. and they eventually caught up to Drusilla. So what happened? Because if it's somewhere on one end of the spectrum, if it's on the Alicia narrative, then wow, what's wrong with Jihoon? If it is the other narrative, then wow, why are Alicia and Deavan so intent on ridiculing him and seeing him to blame for everything? Or is it somewhere in between? I have a hard time understanding what exactly happened is the thing. I have a hard time gauging how to see the situation, because I didn't know what happened. I don't know what happened exactly.
She is 3 years old. Imagine your son was 3 years old and he took off running down that street, and you were halfway down this street and you yell at me, Taeyong, get Taeyong! And I turn around and say, don't yell at me.
Okay, so that was what I was wondering. So that's an interesting screenshot. That I was wondering if that was the way they were describing it, is that he was running after Drusilla and he stopped and turned around to say, stop yelling at me. Okay, yeah, that's not a good move. And I suspect that it was a tense situation for him. So here's my hypothesis about Jihoon in that situation, is that he genuinely cares, but given that he has been potentially parented and treated in a way that makes him feel like a child, children don't feel responsible for things. They don't have that in their fiber, for a good reason. Like when your lights go off because you didn't pay the bill, you don't want the children in the household going like, crap, I got to get a job. The children just say, hey, parents, take care of it. Or when you're hungry as a 10-year-old, usually you want a situation where they just go, Mom, I'm hungry. You don't want a 10-year-old going like, crap, how am I going to forage my own food? How am I going to get a job to pay for McDonald's or something? So that being in your fiber of I am responsible, I'm the top of the pyramid at this point, is something that is developed slowly throughout the teenage and into your 20s. But and by the time the end of that process, you believe I am responsible. The buck stops with me. If I don't do it, no one is going to do it. So in a similar situation, if we had siblings, for example, say a 9-year-old brother of the 3-year-old Drusilla, and you say, Jihoon, little 9-year-old Jihoon, get Drusilla, and 9-year-old Jihoon runs after, and you're yelling at him, belittling him, and the 9-year-old turns around and says, "Stop yelling at me." We would expect that possibly. It's not a wonderful situation, but we wouldn't necessarily think that was unusual for a 9-year-old to not really embody or have the, deep in their fiber that, look, the buck stops with me, and if someone's yelling at me, it doesn't matter. I'm the only one that's going to save Drusilla, my younger sister. And I wonder if that's what Jihoon is suffering from, particularly under high-stress situations. That seems to be a very good possibility. Now, what other people are going to interpret it as is that he is a loser and that he doesn't care. But I don't think that's true. I think he does care. I think he deeply cares. I think of all the cast members I've seen on this show about caring and about wanting to make something work, I believe him when he says he wants to make this work. But because of his dependency and his childish nature, it causes these problems where it looks like he doesn't care, which concerns me because I'm pulling for this couple. But anyway, if that's what happened, I totally get where Alicia and Deavan are coming from, for sure. For him to stop and turn around and while Drusilla is running off into the street, yeah, like, what are you doing, pal? No.
As your son is running towards cars, how would you feel?
Now, it's frustrating for me to watch this because what needs to happen from the beginning is for someone, a therapist, to sit down with Jihoon and say, what is going on with your personality that is causing all these problems? You're a good person. You're trying. You really want to make this work. What is getting in the way? And without any conversation like that, the conclusion is he's just a terrible person. He's a loser, which is not a viable explanation as to why this is happening. And so I can't see this changing. I can't see this helping. So it's frustrating to watch for me.
How would you feel?
I know.
Alicia's right. It's my fault.
아빠로 그녀를 보호해야 뭐 이제 의무가 있어?
I don't think you know. I think it's a game.
Right. That's the conclusion. Typical conclusion is like, this is a game to you. You're a manipulator. There's something wrong with you. What would be the game? What's the prize? Having a wife and children and a mother-in-law that hate you, like what he has, it'd be so easy for him to just say, I'm done, go back to the United States, just consider me out. That would, be an easier road potentially, right? So I don't know what the game is precisely. Now, what would help is if Jihoon had I don't think he does, but if he had a conceptualization as to why he does these things, then he could explain and be like, you're 100% right. And here is why I did that. I have this problem of childishness that kicks in. I'm working on it in therapy. I think that would help the mom and Deavan to trust. But because he has no explanation, because who would? Dependent personality spectrum is extremely complex. Most people don't understand it. A lot of therapists don't even understand it. By the way, a lot of people, including therapists, use the word codependent, which is an incorrect usage of that term when they're describing dependent personality. And they often will look at someone like him and, let me know, would you label him as codependent or not? Because sometimes I don't have a very good grasp on what, people throw around the word codependent a lot. And for the record, as I've said before, codependency is something from addiction. You had someone that was dependent on alcohol. They were drinking alcohol and they were dependent on the substance to get through the day, if you will. And then you had the codependent, say a co-pilot to the dependency. So you had the mom who would drink every day. She was dependent on the alcohol. And then you had the codependent, meaning that the husband is also dependent on the alcohol, but as a co-pilot to the alcoholism. And there were certain personality and certain behaviors and maybe some personality traits that were indicative of that codependency. That's what codependency means. That's what it's always meant. That's the only thing that it means. But people in the layperson world and increasingly in the clinical world are using codependency as a stand-in for the word dependent personality. In the DSM, where is it? It's behind me. There's a diagnosis called dependent personality, which I think is what everyone's using the word codependency for, which is, it's fine for lay people to abuse words, but when I hear clinicians abusing the words, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, and I said something to my students the other day. I was giving them this soapbox speech to try to drill into them, stop using the word codependency wrong and use the clinical term. And what I asked them was, have you ever read in graduate school, have you ever read anything about codependency? Have you ever studied it before? And they're like, no. Then why are you using the word? You're using it from the internet. Don't use terms from the internet. Use your education. Look up, if you want to look up the clinical material on codependency, do so, and they'll talk about what I talked about. So whenever and I've done this before, and I did this when I was a novice, and I still do to some extent, you're so unknowledgeable as a student, by the way, and as a novice clinician. It takes decades to learn things. I have students who will, I like to give students the landscape, and part of doing that shows them how much they need to learn. I give them all of the categories of theory, and I say, to be a good therapist, you have to learn about all of them, in my opinion. You have to learn about behaviorism. You have to learn about cognitivism. You have to learn about psychodynamic. You have to learn about humanistic therapy, which is a whole huge thing. You have to learn about attachment theory. You have to learn systems theory. You have to learn a little bit about physiology and the body. You have to learn about feminism and racism and oppression and internalized oppression and history and politics and what else am I missing here? Psychoanalysis. You have to learn about all, and each one of these categories is rich with years and years of study. In order to be a good therapist, you have to learn all that stuff. And they're like, the students look at me like, I don't understand any of that stuff, and this is overwhelming to me. And even the DSM, which we use to diagnose people, it takes years to know the DSM well enough to actually diagnose fully. It took me years. I would say 10 years into my career after graduating, I probably understood the DSM 5%, really. I understood certain things pretty well, but the rest of it was kind of a fog to me. I understood it well enough to talk about it kind of, but definitely not well enough to detect it or to assess it. Psychological conditions are extremely complicated, particularly when you apply humans to them, because humans are very variable, and sometimes they don't tell you what's really happening, or sometimes they can't conceptualize what's really happening, and you have to detect things that they don't even know about themselves sometimes, or they're not aware of themselves anyway. So it's overwhelming. So it's not surprising to me that we have novice therapists who are misusing terms and going to the internet or going to popular culture to absorb things because they're just so desperate to learn things. But what I encourage people to do is, as they're using terminology and concepts, take a beat and say, am I using that right? And now, this isn't a pedantic thing. Some people say, well, you're just being pedantic about the word codependent. No, I'm not. The codependency is an important concept in addictions. It's an important concept that we need to retain. Dependent personality is also important. And when you Google codependency, you're going to get a lot of crap on the internet. When you Google dependent personality disorder, you probably won't. Now, if you Google dependent personality disorder, you will not understand dependent personality disorder. You need to, for me to understand, and there are many different kinds, and listen to my whole deep dive, which is available to patrons only. There's a lot of different types of dependent personality, all generating from the same place. But it's an extremely complicated idea, and you have to experience it firsthand. I've treated a lot of people and experienced a lot of people in my personal life with dependent personality. And it's very particular. You can't just look at someone and go, I know them. And that's why whenever I watch this show, I'm heavily speculating. And And I'm not just giving it lip service. Like, I genuinely believe that I can't say anything about their personality unless I were able to talk to them. So I'm just throwing out ideas, beginnings of certain avenues I would go down with these individuals if I were actually working with them.
So I do not accept your apology.
I'm
I don't accept your apology. I don't. It means nothing. Words mean nothing. Actions mean everything.
So again, I totally understand where the grandmother is coming from. Absolutely. He continually makes these mistakes. He continually lies, and then he apologizes. But at some point, you have to say, look, your apology doesn't mean anything because you continually make these mistakes. Now, I think the misperception that the grandma is making is that he doesn't care and that he's playing a game. I don't think that's true. I think he actually is running into some personality problems, and it's preventing him from being able to rise to the occasion. It doesn't make it any better, but I don't think he's purposefully doing it.
I'm going to kill you.
Originally mother-in-law, son. Very good relationship.
Okay.
Now, me and Alicia, very danger.
Now, I will commend him for taking it. I mean, we could imagine a lot of other behaviors that we've seen on this show in Jihoon's position: defensiveness, walking away, falling apart. He took it, and that's commendable. I think he's got a lot of work to do, and I think he needs a lot of therapy. But, I want to point out good behavior when I see it. Again, I want to emphasize that the grandmother has every right to be upset. I'll back up a lot of the things that she was saying. It makes total sense that she would be upset and would be angry at him for putting his butthurt feelings before saving his own stepchild from running into the street.
대구 씨가 칼질 잘하나요?
아, 못해요. 솔직 담백.
What is expected out of a Korean daughter-in-law?
한국인 며느리에게서
This is a great question, and it's a question I wish more of the Americans would ask in situations like this, instead of just assuming that their culture is going to dominate. So she's saying, okay, what's expected of daughters-in-law? And let's see what the mom says. This will be good.
예상되는 거.
크게 바라지는 않고
Without much hope.
Oh.
Okay, so the translator biffed on that one. The mom is saying, well, I don't expect a lot. And then it translated it as without much help. I think that the translator is, anyway, and I think Deavan is interpreting it as, I'm not going to help you very much or something, or you're not going to be of much use. And so, their relationship isn't, they don't have a very deep relationship. So when the translator makes a mistake like that, I don't think Deavan knows, like, oh, the translator must have made a mistake. That I think she just takes that as truth. So that's not a good thing to happen.
100일 잔치 때 많은 손님들이 오시니까
Many guests come for the 100 days.
인사만 해주면 고맙겠어.
I'd appreciate it if you only say hello.
Oh, no. Oh, no. So the mom is saying to Deavan, when everyone comes to the party, I'd appreciate it if you said hello to everyone. I'm wondering if she's basing that on her knowledge of Deavan not being a very polite person. I don't know if Deavan is an impolite person or doesn't have that kind of protocol, but I could see the mom observing in Deavan a certain shyness under situations like that. So anyway, the mom is like, look, just make sure you say hello to everyone. Instead, the way that it translates it as just say hello. In other words, say nothing else, because I don't want you interacting with anyone. Just say hello and be like a statue. Just, be seen and not heard kind of a thing. So, and because their relationship isn't very strong, Deavan will believe that the translator is right, which is, that's terrible.
Say hello. No talking.
그냥 말하지 마.
아마도 100일 축하한다고 많은 사람들이 이야기할 거야.
Perhaps hundreds of people will say that they celebrate 100 days.
그러면 고맙다고 인사를 하면 됨.
Then you can say thank you.
Oh, this is a comedy of errors. I feel like I'm watching a Three's Company episode. So now the translator is essentially, and they're also miscommunicating, just in general, that, okay, yeah, you could say hello and you can say thank you, and that's it. This is awful to watch.
I'm very anxious about meeting Jihoon's family because it's unusual for Koreans to marry someone who already has a kid. I'm curious to see how they react to our family unit. Just want to be able to relax and enjoy the party and not have to worry about what people think about me.
All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself and take care of others because we all deserve it. We really, really do.